Mexico?
No, I'm home.
Oh,
Just about.
welcome home, but how
Thank you.
smart of you to go.
Yes, I got all the weather warnings.
Yeah.
Nixville was popping off my phone the whole time. Welcome to everyone, and I guess we don't have to introduce. Well, we can. We have Tom and Lynn and Sarah and myself, Randall. Um, Approval of today's agenda, which you got in within the hour.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, can we approve that?
Yep.
It's kind of the same old, same old. Uh, and then the review of the minutes of was it the 27th or the 13th? I have the 13th, but did we have minutes on the 27th or did that get postponed or?
On the 27th of January,
Yeah, I think that was a meeting with Lori as the,
we should have those
okay.
but um
I didn't have them to send out and Lori didn't send them to me. So
I
I have
I
to
haven't
admit,
seen them.
or did we I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. No, it would not have been on the 27th of February.
no, January.
I mean of January.
Yeah.
Let me just look here.
Okay.
Well, I will go back in and look if I sent her anything, and I don't know that. Tom, can you? I don't think we convened. There was something crazy in
Lori.
there, and we had a scheduled meeting, and then we didn't do it.
Lori
Right.
just came in.
Well, that was the 10th uh didn't happen, but I thought the 20, there's Lori now. We can ask Lori firsthand. So Lori, was there a meeting on January 27th that you hosted?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
January 27th, did you host a meeting? You were going to run that meeting. So you did, right?
I did.
Okay, did we get notes from that meeting? Do you know? Did you receive notes or did Lynn?
I recorded it.
You
So
recorded it?
did you? But this is going to be bad news because I'm looking at my calendar because I had a computer crash on my laptop and lost a number of significant things, and I'm wondering because I know I did them, right?
Okay.
I'm looking in my sheet now and it shows that the notes were there, but I don't have a hard copy. So I think we're just going to have to rely on the electronic version. I have had some recovery going on other things, but it has not been successful. So I apologize, and the problem is solved now, and we have recovered some things, but I bet that's why you don't have them.
Okay. Well, if you have a copy and can send a copy uh, to me, I will forward it so it goes into the archive.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we won't review the minutes, but we have reviewed that we have minutes, so that's good. Uh, okay. Does anyone have a conflict of interest with anything on today's agenda?
No conflict.
No conflict.
I have no conflict. Lynn, do you have any conflicts with the agenda items?
No.
Okay, no conflicts are recorded. All right, here we go. So the last I heard, Tom and Sarah were updating a document, and that was for the meeting on the 27th. So I don't have any knowledge as to whether that's still an ongoing process. And the documents continue to be reviewed and include new information. So please take it away, Tom and Sarah. Maybe help me catch up.
Well, I don't. Sarah's definitely gone through a lot of process in order to boil down what's really changing. She's worked with the consultant, and I'm not sure I have the most recent document. Those documents are really kind of advisory for us constructing things. Um, Sarah, do you have any? I don't think we've published that document, have we? I don't remember.
No, we didn't. If I recall, where we left off was we got through the 1 through 4s,
Yeah,
through 4 units on our document. And then we were going to pick up from there on cottage clusters and townhomes. And I think the townhome piece is pretty straightforward. Oh, and you guys, I don't know if it's super windy down in Neskowin. I'm assuming it is. Our lights keep flickering up here. So if I
Oh.
disappear, you know what happened.
well, it's
Um,
definitely windy
I
here.
hope you reappear.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, Tom, I thought where we had left off was we were going to start talking about cottage clusters today.
Yeah, I've got, we're halfway through the discussion on cottage clusters, and I've got
Mhm.
that uh, PowerPoint queued up,
Mhm.
Oh, good.
so we could do that.
Okay. Welcome,
well-
Mark.
I was hoping that Guy would be here because I did have one
I
other
have questions.
kind of a question that I'd like to have answered. Let me share um, input that Guy gave me. He was of the opinion that the document should be more formal than it is.
Right.
And I'll share by given permission.
And can I jump into that real quick, Tom?
Sure.
What I would offer for that is I will write the standards into your zoning code documents. So as they are already adopted for the Neskowin residential zones, that's actually the work I'm going to do. So what our matrix and tables are doing is informing me of those edits that I am actually going to start here pretty quick.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so they will be more formalized.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, that alleviates some problem because I want to make sure that the document really addresses all the audiences. One segment of which is people who want to know what Neskowin is all about. And let me share one edit that Guy had suggested. Uh, his general approach was to make things less of conversational and more of declarative statements. I think that that's a little bit harsh for the background information on values, but I don't think that's a decision I should make. I think we should get other people, the other three of you in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's valuable to note the process by which these came about. And so I don't see it being detrimental to include, as a result of the process with the communities, the subcommittee was able to group the values into 4 main categories, indicating that this was not just pulled out of a hat. Maybe if the area previous to that goes through what the process is, so I don't see the context which leads to this statement, but if it describes the process, then maybe it's redundant, but otherwise I'd like to include some things that always make clear that the community was involved in determining these, and the subcommittee grouped them once they got all the information or something, as this was stated previously. What how do other people see this?
I don't want it to emphasize too much the subcommittee because we have made such an emphasis on community process. So if we do say something about the process here, which I'm not sure we need to because we've talked about the process earlier in the document. If we do need to say something about the process, perhaps it could say something like, based upon community input, the Neskowin community values can be categorized as follows, or something like that.
Okay, we already have that in a paragraph above it.
Yeah, that's good. That's important. So
And I actually went through and looked at the 11, actually, we should let Lynn give her opinion before I give mine. Sorry.
how do you feel, Lynn, about this?
So I'm sorry, I was texting with my tech person. Say it one more time.
Okay, so basically, Guy would like to make things more declarative statements rather than talking about process.
Yeah, I mean, um, I a little bit feel that I never like talking about process. I only like talking about this, then we're doing this, then we're doing that. But I do know that on documents like this, it is important to reference some process along the way because this is the community's plan. This is not our plan. And there's always a sense that people have kind of gone off somewhere and created stuff. So to me, Tom, I am kind of a do both. Don't simplify it as much as you can. Minimize process talk. There has to be some process talk, however, because this certainly has been a process, number one. And number two, people need to take ownership.
Okay.
Does
So-
that help?
Yes, it does help. It is consistent. One of the things that I did was I looked at the 11 other community plans for Tillamook County, reviewed them, and they some of them are more declarative, some of them are more formal, and some of them are quite a bit less than ours. But what I did notice as a general rule, they tended to be more conversational when they're talking about values and background. And when they interpreted the values into goals, and there they were quite formal, simple declarative sentences. So I think,
Okay.
as you said, as we have both, we give people the feeling that there's this participatory process, but then we're fairly concise about what we'd like to do.
Right. And probably we should, just factor into that generally. I'll admit that I'm probably overly influenced by an article I read this morning in Atlantic Monthly about how since the late 1800s, people have used processes like this to the disadvantage of the expansion of housing in the United States. It's a fascinating article and it kind of blew my mind, but I do think you know and Sarah, you're probably the best read on this. The law, the statute is very clear that if we're being if we're being declarative in any way that conflicts with the new housing, affordable housing or middle housing, however we're describing it, then we're being too strong, that we have to be sure that we're not being exclusionary. So that's my only caveat is I think we just need to be really clear that we're not coming up with more and more stuff to make it harder and harder to figure this out. And as long as we meet that standard, I think we're fine with the law. But that's to me where the boundaries get important is, we're not trying to use land use planning to ensure that things don't happen. We're also trying to use land use planning to ensure that things do happen. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if that's consistent with what I've said, the simple declarative sentences are not going to hide anything
Right.
No.
in terms of what our recommendations or policies might be. And I'm not trying to hide anything, but I am trying to make sure that it feels like this was a community effort, not just us.
Mhm.
And I did have a side issue on that. We, amongst ourselves, I think, have gotten pretty well convinced that if housing, the other thing that Guy added was a fifth value, housing diversity and affordability. I think that's a value that's important, but that's not one that came up in the discussion. So I don't know how we should think about how we modify that.
Well, we haven't had really a more of a town meeting type meeting that would discuss housing diversity and affordability. But we had sessions with Sarah about what SB 406 would be, and that was more like her explaining housing and a lot of issues. That was pretty dense information, and we got feedback in the session, but it wasn't like we were having how this fit exactly into the plan. That's kind of what's happening this spring. So I think there's still time to have this be a value and have it be under discussion and either affirm or disaffirm whether housing diversity and affordability is one of the values. But I think it's obviously going to be with SB 406.
Well,
So
I mean, a value versus a rule. I mean, we could say, yeah, okay, there's a rule, we have to do it, and not have it as a value. I mean, that's possible.
no,
I don't think that's, from a personal viewpoint, I don't think that's the right way to be. But
no, because the values are supposed to drive the
yeah, well,
things that we say.
well,
Now,
values and the environment, the environment being a legal environment, that's going to drive it too.
yes,
I don't want to be argumentative.
okay.
Maybe I do, I don't know.
So Sarah, I know, has put in the chat that the policies must be declarative. So
Yes,
I
yeah.
think that's just a good, if we just use that as, if it's a policy, it's got to be declarative. And that gives us kind of the boundaries of the minimum required for declarative statements. And I think the impact of the document is also stronger with, if I were trying to divide it into percentages, 30% process and 70% declarative.
We have 30% process, unknown percent of declarative, and we have another 110% of background.
Right, right. We
Well-
Neskowin people do love our history. I'm just telling you.
I mean, there is no other community plan which comes close to the size of this one right now, and we're
That's
not even
true.
done.
Well, for my 2-bit wrap up, I really think that with the statement above and then the vision, that it could be more declarative when it says the values. Because in reading through the vision and values statement that is the beginning, it seems like it kind of covers.
Yeah. I would simplify, as an editor, I'll simplify this. Can be categorized as is a little bit stuffy. Well, I'll make it a little less stuffy, but
Okay.
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 so I heard 2 votes here for more and 2 votes here, or at least 1.5 for going along the lines of what Guy wants. It sounds like the majority kind of wants to have it tightened up a little bit.
I agree with Guy's approach.
Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So the housing diversity and affordability piece doesn't have to go in your values. It can be a policy that's part of your goal 10 discussion later in the community plan. And that will mirror what is in the county's goal 10 element for the comprehensive plan. So I think there is a place to put this, but I agree, I don't think it has to be here.
Okay.
With that, we've already got something like that in the county's goal 10 comp plan as a policy. So folding it into Neskowin in your goal 10 area to talk when you talk about housing is consistent. And the other thing, just talking about the policies, thank you, Lynn, for sharing my comments in the chat. The other thing I would say is, that's really where my role in review of the community plan draft becomes critical, is because I'm going to look at all of your policies and make sure, 1, they're consistent with the county's comprehensive plan policies, and 2, they're consistent with statewide planning goal policies. So just that's why I love this conversation, and I am helping to track this because you can, your document is rich in history and in a really solid background that supports how you get to your policies. And that's what's important. The commentary supports that declarative sentence of what that policy is. So if you guys keep going, I'm watching all of this, and that's what's in my mind too, is inventorying the comprehensive plan policies that I do not have them all memorized. But just making sure if there's something that jumps out at me, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'll tighten it up some, but make sure that I leave at least some hints that there's some process into it.
Okay,
Well, okay. Thank you for allowing the diversion.
sure.
We
Okay,
all work for you, Tom.
That's right.
all right. Now, let me,
Thankfully, Tom, thankfully.
Yes. Yes, yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So onto the actual topic which you tried to bring up. Grant, sorry.
And
Uh,
Tom, I have something real quick on this because I finally got my brain straight on something that I am worried. Can we circle back around just covering the slides that we did last week? Can you pull up one of the 3 or 4 unit slides?
okay.
Because it was a month ago, and I just want to make sure. So I had a conversation with the consultant.
Let's see. This one is completely about cottage clusters. So
Oh, never mind.
It's a different presentation. I can find it.
No. I can just, Randall, because you weren't part of the last conversation, I just want to make sure for the record that I've got this straight with everyone. When it comes to the underlying zone, like we were talking about the Neskowin RR zone. And remember where we were having the conversation about why would a triplex be able to drop to 5,000 and a fourplex to 7,000 square feet for lot size? Do you guys remember that?
Yep.
Okay. So going back and recombing the language and then confirming with the consultant, it's those thresholds or the minimum lot size requirement of the zone. So we can leave everything at 20,000 square feet.
Okay. Sarah, say that one more time
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I think I got it,
So
but
for a triplex, middle housing code. Oh my gosh, the wind just kicked my door open. Okay.
To go.
For middle housing codes, thank you, Tom. Okay. This can be 20,000 square feet. Tom, it's 20,000 square feet for everything except for, let's see, no, I think we can apply that 20,000 square feet across the board.
Okay.
So punchline is for triplexes in every zone, we don't have to drop it down to 5,000. And for fourplexes, we don't have to drop it down to 7,000. We can if we want, but I did confirm they can stay at 20,000 square feet or 7,500 square feet for the Neskowin R1 zone. So Tom, if you want to send me that slide deck, I will make the corrections to that.
Okay.
And clean it up for you. Okay, thank you. And thank you.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for giving me the space to do that and share that.
I will save it as a new version, and then you save it as another new version.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll capture this.
And I'll send that back to you.
Okay.
So one of the things I think, Sarah, that underscores, and Ram, this is something for our task force or our subcommittee, steering committee to really focus on, is the kind of level of clarity from these slides and from that remarkable map that Sarah's staff produced that showed where these kinds of housing developments could occur.
Uh-huh.
that is going to change the conversation with the community, because we've gone through this whole process and we haven't had the clarity that we've had in the last 3 meetings. And so the people who attended the work sessions are going to have that same reaction. They're going to go, oh, whoa, it's like a light bulb comes on. So I just want to prepare us for that, because I think we need to just factor that into our game plan here, is that it's going to be a showstopper for some people, good and bad. I don't know how they're going to read it. I don't know what their reactions will be. But the level of clarity is so much higher on what exactly is involved and what exactly occurs and where it goes.
Mhm. I agree, Lynn. Thank you.
So it's sounding like what you're saying is people are going to do a reset and reconsider things. Do we need to have a community?
No, I actually think if I had to bet money, which I'm not a betting person, but I would bet the people are relieved that they're not going to want to reset. No one ever wants to be in a public meeting and raise their hand and say, I have no idea what you're talking about, and it doesn't make sense to me, and I don't understand it. People just won't do that. And land use either makes people angry, or it makes them kind of embarrassed because they don't think they understand it, or they don't understand it because it's complicated. But I think when we give them this information, they're going to feel empowered, and I don't think they're going to reset. They may tweak, and they may have some concerns and some enthusiasms. I just think they're going to find it a relief to be able to see it and understand it in a concrete way.
Okay. So one of the things that one of my other hats is the bylaws committee. They were thinking about having some public meetings, but not until April. So if we had something in next month that we just explained that, well, remember all those things we said? Here's what it all means.
Yeah.
I think that might be useful.
Well, I'd like to see the rehearsal before we spring that
Yeah.
meeting or schedule the meeting. I'd like to kind of go through it ourselves so that we have an idea. Here's the map, and here are the standards, and this is how they work, and here's where it would be available, so that it can be a real easy walkthrough to have them comprehend each layer as we explain it to them, and so that altogether it makes sense to them, because I'm not sure I'm there enough to be able to explain it right now. And I know that when you put stuff up there, you want them to really grasp it each step, so then it all makes sense when all the pieces are in there.
Right. And one of the things I think is that we need to do before we have a meeting in March, if we can do that, which I think would be an excellent idea,
Yeah.
is just to put, stamped all over the place, draft, draft, draft. But to give them the document, give them the maps, and say, this is a draft. And so we're going to bring you up to date on information, but this is not the final, but we're trying to get to a final submittal to the county. I think people having the whole thing in one bite will enable us to have a public meeting. But
so we wouldn't actually be doing recommendations. My thought was that we would just be digesting those meetings that we had before into something which is more comprehensible, rather than having our recommendations in it.
What I will have for you by April. So if we could do 2 monthly meetings back to back and do an open house. It would be the concepts in March. I will have those draft zoning documents, not the community plan, but the zones themselves. I will have those in April. So they can actually see on paper with these amazing, matrices, Tom, that you've put together. They will actually be able to see what the draft language is going to start looking like, especially the prescriptive pieces.
And will the map be with that, Sarah, in April?
Yeah, we can do the map. We can do the map in March and April. If
Yeah,
you
that
guys
would be
wanted to
huge.
do,
Yeah,
yeah, because I think they need to see the maps and I think they need to see these tables.
yep,
And then I think if we did that towards the end of March, then in April, we could come back with the actual, like, I would have the draft Neskowin R1 zoning document done
woohoo.
so they could see it.
Yep, that's a great plan. I like that plan a lot.
Okay.
We have to look because I think the last week, I'm looking here, the last week of March is spring break in Oregon this
Mhm.
year, I think. Yes, the last week of March, um, which is the 24th through the 28th is spring break.
Mhm.
And so we just want to factor that in, maybe doing the 29th as a meeting time. As opposed to the first weekend of spring break, which would be the 22nd.
I can hold that on my calendar.
Rand, what do you think of that? I'm in Thai Valley on the 21st through the 23rd of March. So I'm not available, not accessible. I'm off in the wilderness. But I
And
think
me too.
if we looked at the 29th, Tom and Lori, how does that look for you all?
I should be back in town by the 29th.
Right now, that's fine for me. This is Lori.
Great.
What day of the week is that?
It's a Saturday.
So
Okay.
maybe we could use the clubhouse in the morning.
Yeah, I bet we could.
If not, it's in the interest of momentum or whatever and staying on track, we could certainly, I have this beautiful garage that I built that Tillamook County let me build, and it has like heat and windows and a really nice glass garage door. So we could have it there if we can't have it. If the golf course is open by then, which would surprise me, but is not
Yeah.
impossible, then
Would-
we could have the public meeting at my garage.
You gonna get everybody through the gate?
That's easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other option would be to do the March meeting virtual with this PowerPoint presentation and the April meeting hybrid to get recommendations and different things too and feedback.
Yep.
So the first one you see as being more, again, somewhat instructional as to what this is, what it looks like, answer questions about what it is, and then the April one being more like, okay, now we're gonna engage your comments and we're gonna chew on this more with everybody.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's super smart because it's much easier to understand when you have the voice and you can hear clearly on a Zoom and you
Yeah.
can see it right in front of you.
Yeah, the virtual with the formal, more of a formal presentation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Tom, does that work for you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I've got that on my calendar. That works for me too. So Randall and Mark, if you guys want to pick the time for that, then I've got it on.
Okay. March
Yeah.
29th. Yes, it is I've got the big birthday party that day, the 80th birthday party. So we could do that earlier, like the morning meeting, don't you think?
Yes. Absolutely. Morning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
10 a.m.,
10 a.m.
What's the date again? Mark
the 29th of
of March. Okay, okay.
And then in April,
yes, April. So a couple weeks later, like middle, do it by the middle.
mhm,
And
So there's
just not on
there's a
tax day. Please don't do it on tax day.
Okay.
What
So
is
there is
tax
a-
day this year?
If they're all in by now, by then.
Tuesday. So
we do
Easter
have a
weekend is the 19th and 20th.
Okay.
Don't do it then.
And we have a general meeting on the 12th.
Could we do an extended meeting on the 12th?
Well, I think so. The 12th is going to be kind of a big, there's going to be elections that day. There's going to be elections for 2 positions that day. There's going to be updates for bylaws and for the community plan. I imagine that the bylaws are going to maybe have done some feedback sessions. So I think the general meeting might be
Full.
a little bit lengthy that day. And
Why
I'm
don't-
not, no,
Why
go
don't we
ahead.
go
Rhonda.
for the 19th?
19th is
Is it-
Easter weekend.
That's Easter this year?
Yeah,
Oh, it's Sunday. Yeah, it's Sunday, but not
I
Saturday.
have an Easter egg hunt at my house on the 19th, and so I can't reschedule it, but you guys could
Yeah.
proceed
You
without
don't
me.
do it on Sunday?
No, because everyone has 10,000 other things they're supposed to do.
Where do you live, Lynn? We want to come to the Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, well, I live in Vancouver, but the Easter egg hunt is in Portland, so easily
Oh.
accessible.
Oh.
You're all welcome. It's hysterical.
Well,
I am available on the 19th to come and do the presentation if other folks are available.
okay. Well, I know we do Easter here and it's crazy, but I think if we could do the meeting on the 19th for engagement with the public about this, about the housing thing. Otherwise, I think we're all the way out to the 26th. It's a month after the other one, but
Yeah, I go ahead with the 19th, and particularly if we did it, I don't know if we can start as early as 9 o'clock in the morning, but I'd be happy to join by Zoom if we can do that.
But the other thing would be to do it on the 5th, which just makes us keep people engaged when they're still thinking about the presentation that they heard
a week earlier.
of the week, because
I can do that. I can make that work.
So that's, if we
okay.
could turn it around that fast, that seems really ideal to me. I just didn't know if we could do it that quickly, but boy, if we could, that's a great way to get people, would be to do it on the 5th.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're going to be clear enough, having presented it the week before, that then we're ready to review that piece by piece with the public the following week.
Yep.
I mean, it's the same
seems
material.
better than letting everybody forget about it and then have to
Yeah.
re-engage. It's
Yep.
kind of like, if you're engaged, you are, or you're not.
Yeah, let's go for the
Yeah.
5th.
So are you meeting on the 31st or the 1st, or what's the previous date?
The
Before the
29th
29th? Okay, got of
of
March.
We're March. Okay, got it.
the
Okay,
next
Yeah.
Saturday.
okay. So this is fine. I mean, it's fine with me. I won't be at the 5th. I'm going to be out of the country, but so I won't be at any meetings in April, really. So Alex is running the general meetings and can attend what he's able to do. But I don't know on the 5th if you've got tasks for the chairperson to do or the vice chair on that day or not.
I think it would be great if someone could be there from the board.
Okay, yeah,
Because that's important, but
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
someone other than you, Mark.
Yeah,
we'd
okay,
love to
okay.
have you there.
okay.
And we'd like to do that at the golf course, do we think?
Golf course or the fire hall, whatever. I mean, the golf course was reasonably functional.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll take responsibility for checking with the golf course.
Okay. Do they have a new manager or is it Skip at this point?
It's Skip. Well, I think Skip, but
Okay.
and I can even, because I'm a member of the board, can even just be the person opening it up. But what time?
Well, we were thinking earlier in the morning, it could be now, I think it could be 10, since we're not doing it in conflict with your Easter.
Yeah.
So why don't we say 10 rather than 9? Because I do think people, we
Yep.
get more attendance at 10 than 9.
Yep.
And 10 o'clock for the first one on the 29th as well.
Correct.
Yep. Great. Oh, that's great. Good idea, Lori.
Okay, so we got a month to get ready for this, so that's good.
And I think in terms of just the zoning code updates, we can easily get there. I think some of the deeper dive on the community plan stuff we'll continue to work through, and that's fine. If I take the zoning code updates to the planning commission and the board, and then come back with the community plan updates, we can chunk them out, because ultimately, like I'd mentioned, the goal 10 policies of the comp plan already support the work we're doing. So I want to make sure for the community plan, you guys have that additional time you need for some of those other sections that you still want to continue to work through. So if we phase it in, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Okay.
So I
So
would just add, just looking, so that's a Saturday on the 29th, a Saturday on the 5th, and a Saturday on the 12th for NCAC meetings, which is fine. We also have the bylaws that are going to start to want to schedule some feedback sessions for the policies and procedures. So I'm just throwing that out there just to make folks aware that there
Traffic. There's
the meetings
traffic.
are stacking up. So just a piece of information. So
I think thank you, Mark. I think that's really important, but I also think we're going to get
Yeah.
done and get out of your way. Number one. And number two, generally on property stuff, you probably
Yeah.
have a different crowd than
Yeah,
the usual,
Yeah. I think you're right, Lynn. I think that there's going to be very, very high interest on your meetings, and I feel like honestly that the bylaws have done such a nice job the first time through that there's a fair amount of, I guess, just trust with that group moving forward. I think, and
It's a
so
fan
I think you're
base.
right. I think you're, well, whatever. So I think you're right. I think you're right.
but I also think Rand, maybe we're Tom, you are a pivotal part of this because you've put in these yeoman efforts with Sarah. And do those dates work for you in terms of what we have to give to people?
I think that well, depending on the topics for the meeting on the 5th, how much we get done is mostly a matter of what we get done in the committee. I've gotten some ideas on how to organize better the document we have, having read all of the other ones. Well, okay, reviewed all the other ones. I won't say I read them, but I think I have at least now places where we can hang our proposed statements.
Okay.
So it's strange after having worked with this for what, 6 months now, I finally beginning to understand those other documents.
That's
I've read them
good.
before, and I just was like, oh, I don't understand this at all.
It's sinking in. That's good.
I don't know.
Mhm.
When you're a technical editor, you're meant to be a pseudo expert. You don't really know it, but you know the words.
Okay.
And Sarah, can I ask you a quick question? I've
Yeah.
been in 2 settings recently, to say nothing of the contemporary media, where I have heard that the interest rate is going to be 6 or 7% for housing, period. And it's going to be for a long time, or maybe even higher, but it's not going lower. And for those of us who are of an age and bought their first house at 14% interest rate, that's just, that seems fine. But do you all have with your consultants any sense of what that means for middle housing? Because part of what I'm still curious about is if middle housing ever gets built, and what are the parameters or expectations for that occurring?
Yeah, so there are expectations that are set forth in the bills and through the governor. We've talked before, Lynn, you and I especially, about how the actual production metrics are not meeting her expectations.
Right.
Right. So I think things like interest rates are beyond our control. I think that's going to just be a factor. So I think other housing production strategies are going to come into play, like offsetting SDCs, grants, other types of low interest loans for entities that are specifically looking at workforce and affordable housing. Our housing production strategy, or excuse me, our housing production expectations are yet to be determined for Tillamook County. And that is, I'm actually talking at a meeting with DLCD about that this morning, because what we're looking at doing is taking a regional approach. And that regional approach would be that instead of each community and city being responsible, we would pool the numbers, both for expectations and for production.
Okay.
So that's something that I am working on now with MOUs with the cities, and putting all of those pieces together.
Great.
And all of that work has to be done in 2027, by 2027. So that's the next piece after the work that we are doing.
So one of the things, Sarah, in this Atlantic Monthly article that you will be very...
Can you send that to me?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It's very interesting. But one of the data points, it's the basis of a book that's coming out. But one of the data points is that the affordable housing in America today that is being built where there is the least opportunity, because of a variety for employment. And so that, which is a real problem, because and that is because the places that have the biggest booming economies have also today the highest housing prices, and lack of affordability and lack of capacity, and that the challenge going forward, some of which Oregon has already addressed, is to get housing that is affordable, where one of the priorities it needs to be where people can work, because all you're doing is adding costs if you're not proximate to either mass transit or work. So I'll send you a copy of the article. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
Okay, so we were going on slides, somewhere we were going to slides, and I don't know if we've gotten there yet.
Now, we've been and gone and come back.
Okay. So only you can track where we really are, Tom.
Oh, that's scary. Okay.
It is scary.
Okay. So we were talking about, just to recap, it was a long ago, we were talking about cottage clusters. And I probably should just go through the slides we've already worked on. Everybody can see that?
Yeah.
So we were reviewing Chapter 5 of Middle Housing Code, and we think it means, and we believe we have an understanding of what the definitions are, how things can be set up, some of the approval process, and we had a couple of questions on that, which I've done in the green boxes, I guess. There's one there. And so and that's the, shall we say, the things we don't have an option about. These are the rules. Now, of course, we're going to have a better definition of those now that we have got some more clarity. But what we wanted to go to next was design standards. That's something we do have some control over for cottage clusters.
Okay.
So I guess we should go through that. Some of the options. Ooh, some of the typeface is really small. Hopefully that will be better.
Thank you.
I mean, it was hard for me to read on a 27-inch screen. I can't imagine on a small screen. So their orientation.
Yes, class.
This is a suggestion. Anybody have issues with that? I don't exactly know how we're going to go through these slides.
So those configurations that we saw earlier, a number of them had built these things into them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we've had a visual on it, and it's kind of a checklist of, and these are things that are not going to vary. These are pretty set. Is that accurate?
These are things I think we have some latitude in. Is that right, Sarah?
It is.
What are the
Right.
variables?
Right. So what we can, so a couple of the things, let's see. So they must be clustered around a common courtyard with a ped path if they don't, and must meet the following standards. So we have to, so the things we have to do is we have to allow up to 8 outright. It doesn't mean that they're going to build 8. It means up to 8 on a property. The other must have is the outer perimeter setbacks of the cluster is 10 feet from all exterior property lines.
So
Okay. So 20,
shouldn't
so
that
that's fine.
language be in this document?
Well, I thought, so part of this, I did not get a chance to connect with Tom today. I was gonna go through this with him quickly.
Yeah, and no worries. I just think we need to, when we say design standards, cottage orientation, and Tom, I don't know if there's a subsequent slide, but a layperson needs to be able to look at it and get it. Like how big's or look at a series of slides and get a kind of, here's a cottage cluster, up to 8 units, this many square feet, this much, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just saying we need all the information within proximity to each other so people can get it.
Yeah,
And go ahead, Tom.
I agree. Illustrations are a whole lot better than a sea of words.
But the 8 units is critical because I think when people visualize 8 units, they think, well, depending on how ugly it looks with these other restraints, that's a lot on this amount of property, or not. I mean, I don't even know if that's factually true. I'm just saying they have to be able to do the formulation.
So the size of the property would still ultimately determine the number of cottages, right? Because
Okay.
so if you have a 7,500 square foot lot and you want to put a cottage cluster on it, if you have to have that 10-foot perimeter all the way around for setbacks.
Right.
The other thing is we can require cottages to maintain 10 feet of separation.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so you start adding in all these things, but to Tom's point, there is some flexibility, and where that is as we've talked about, if we want to limit this size to up to 900 square feet and 1 story, or if we want to allow bigger ones, then they have to be 2 story, and then we have to define what 1 and 2 story mean.
And as I remember our conversation, we kind of want to shy away from having to do any bold-faced definitions.
Right.
That's actually fairly tricky.
Mhm.
So it might be helpful to have, the way I would see presenting this would be, have some of the configurations that fit the rules to demonstrate, here's a group, here's a cottage cluster, and all the boxes have been checked. And this is a square footage, these are the setbacks, this is the how many stories or whatever,
Mhm.
but say, and the variables here are a limit of so many square foot, and 1 story is one limitation, or, I mean, I think that they're gonna have to be looking at something like a real thing instead of a bunch of words in order to grasp
Right.
what it is that
Mm.
they're, because that's the tricky thing, is understanding the variables in the midst of all these declarations of it must be this and it must be that.
Mhm.
So is the easiest thing for Sarah and Tom to kind of get together and figure out how to do that? Is that, because I agree with you, Ran. I think that is, we'll be in an endless loop of questions in the April meeting if we haven't taken the rules. And maybe it's easier just to make a list of all the limitations or maximum of 8 depending on square. I just don't know the best way to do this. That is helpful, but it's not. I don't think it has the land size. Does it have measurements? I can't see on my screen. It shows the 10-foot setback. It does not does it say the size of that lot?
It doesn't, but we could write it in. Like we could
Yeah,
do
I
some
mean,
mock-ups.
I would just, and I got to believe, Sarah, with this law being I mean, to be honest, I think the consultant should have produced this at the beginning. Here's the state law, here's the rule options for your county, and here's what 6 of these look like. 6 different configurations based on changing square footage, 2-story, blah, 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 blah. But nonetheless, I got to believe somewhere we can create 3 or 4 pictures with the dimensions so that people can visualize it. Because in this one, as I look at it, the common courtyard, I'm trying to look, the cars are off to the left. Is that right? Or no, we
Yeah.
have no cars here.
Um,
Ours are
We have-
in parking
To the
places.
left.
yeah,
Hey,
it's over here.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So for some of those people, it's not really so much a common courtyard, right? If you're in the upper right-hand corner, you're not getting much of a courtyard effect.
Well, that's what this, well,
Yeah, the middle,
coloring might, see, this is meant to be a path, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So there was a path to it.
But okay, so this is a great picture. We probably need the size of the lot on there because that's how people will think. They'll think about their lot and how many of these they could put on their lot if they chose to.
I can do the math backwards to show that. Like I could say, okay, based on our standards, like, and if we want to add the minimum of 150 square feet of courtyard space per cottage, right? So I could
Right.
do the math to say for 8 units like this is how big the property would have to be.
Right. There you go.
With 1 on-street parking space, or excuse me, with 1 off-street parking space per unit, the setbacks, and the 150 square feet. But what I guess I would, so for the work that Tom and I are doing, I think the decisions that we need to make today to help us, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. The biggest ones are, we don't have to require parking. I'm recommending that every code require the 1 parking space per unit for all middle housing types.
So I support that.
Okay, is there anyone in the committee that does not support that requirement? Okay. Tom, do you have a slide on the size of cottages, the options for the size of cottages and height?
It's been so long since I looked at this.
So while you're doing that, we can go down to require 6 feet of separation between cottages. I prefer the 10 feet, especially if they are platted as part of a land trust or something later that gives that 5-foot side yards, that 5-foot side setback. Does anybody feel the distance between cottages should be reduced to 6, or does everyone agree with 10?
I'm up for 10.
I agree.
Yep.
And just for quality of life for the residents, having
Okay.
some separation is good.
Yep.
Okay, so great. Look at us go. Okay, so
Okay,
one
so
parking.
let me capture these on a slide so that
Thank you, Tom.
otherwise I'll forget.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so the first one was 9
What?
parking place per unit.
One off-street parking space per cottage.
I'm going to say this now just because I'm thinking of it now. Doesn't necessarily belong here, but when we talk about the difference between just allowing 1 stories and 2 stories,
Yep.
we might want to also just think about, we've said it needs to be 10 feet between residences, which gives less space for them, but better quality of life. So maybe we should allow a 2nd story. And I don't have an opinion about that, but it is kind of a give and take, and it's one of the few give and takes that we have to think about.
Yes. So that's perfect. That's exactly where I'm headed next, Lori. So the next thing is we can, if we allow cottages to be greater than 900 square feet, we have to then also allow them to be 2-story.
Even though we don't actually know what that means.
Correct. And we get to define that. So my recommendation for a 2-story, for a single story would be like 17, 18 feet, and 2-story would be 24 feet. That gives opportunity for a pitched roof, which we all know we need here at the coast.
So with 900 square feet
Mm-hmm.
on flat land, wherever that flat land is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't favor 2 stories.
Okay.
Because I think you're going to have a real crowded feeling in some parts of the flat areas. And and 900 square feet, 1 story is a lot of space.
It's 2-bedroom typically.
Yep. And so, and part of what we're trying to do is control cost, right? Because we want these to be affordable. So, but I also think it's going to be, I don't know if on a sloped, if a lot of these properties are on the hillside, then there's probably going to be fewer units per piece of land, and 2-story makes sense. So I just don't know how we deal with that factor, because
we've been talking about kind of variables in the different neighborhoods, and I don't know how realistic that is, but it does seem that if it's in the core of the village, it's one thing. If it's on the side of the hill, it's kind of a different animal. But I don't know how that is written into this.
So I would have to ask the consultant, but what if in the Neskowin RR zone, which is where most of your slopes are, and it's most of the properties east of the highway.
Right.
What if we allowed in the Neskowin RR zone for 2-story cottages up to 24 feet in height? And then we have to set, I think we can allow them to be as big as 1,800 square feet.
Wow.
Right, I know, that's huge. So, so basically our minimum and maximum, excuse me, I'm not going to say that right. For 2 stories, we can allow them to be between 901 square feet and 1,800 square feet per unit. So we
Yep.
can pick anything in between there.
Right.
So what if we said 1,200 square feet maximum to allow for the inefficiency of making space for stairs and spaces that takes up, but it keeps it on the smaller size to keep it affordable and keeps with the concept of this is, workforce housing at two bedrooms and 1 bath or whatever.
Yes,
on
we
the
could.
hills, Lori?
Uh-huh.
You mean on the hills?
Yeah, on the hills, because like if you had a 600 square feet on each floor on a hill, or 400 on the lower floor and 800 above, or however it worked out, the concept of a 900 square foot usable space would be kind of the underlying concept, but the extra square footage on the hills or in the R zone would be allowing for the fact that it was more difficult to develop. Like you had to do the 2 stories to make it work.
Yep.
From a topographical standpoint.
Yep.
Well, and what I would say to that is, when you look at our small lot exceptions, so for lots less than 3,000 square feet, it talks about living space maximums at 1,200 square feet.
Oh, okay.
So that 1,200 square feet, which is intentionally allowing for accommodation of living space for what is anticipated to be a smaller building footprint, because those lots are usually 25 by 100, they're 25 feet wide. The 1,200 square feet is consistent with other areas we already have for smaller structures.
Okay.
So
So maximum on the RR would be 1,200 square feet, Tom.
1,200, okay.
Mhm.
And 24 feet high.
Mhm.
900, is that the maximum or minimum or?
That would be the maximum. Up to. Okay.
I'll order these things better.
Okay. So thank you, Tom. So how does everyone feel about that?
Delighted.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Seems workable.
Okay.
Makes sense.
It will need to explain to the community how we got there,
Mhm.
but I'm sure that's true about the whole thing, so it's surprised there.
Mhm. Well, and they may have some more feedback on that. I mean, basically what we're saying in the RR zone is they could actually build a cottage less than 1,200 square feet. That's the maximum. And they could do a combination of 1 and 2 stories, right?
1.5.
Yeah, but then in the R1 zone, and I would say, Tom, the R1 and R3 zone, actually. Neskowin R1 and Neskowin R3, we would leave them smaller, which I think we can also support that supports that village feel that the
Right,
community wants to preserve.
right. The bungalow.
Yeah, because you don't have any RR zone. Let me double check this before I open my mouth and say something
Yeah,
wrong.
I believe
I
you're
don't
correct.
believe you have any RR zoning west of the highway. And if you do, it's steep.
Well, and it also reflects the practical reality of the fact that the lots in the village are more expensive than the lots on the hillside.
Yep. So Holly is zone Neskowin RR. They've got CCNRs in place. They would have to amend to accommodate that, or they might be fine with that. And then everything else, largely appears to be east of the highway.
Okay, well, that was very helpful to go through that.
Yeah.
Look how clear that is.
You've got, yeah, I think let me do some more work on that, but I think at least for now, that gives us a starting point.
So that deals with the variables that we have.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so I put that in the new starting point and consensus recommendations. I don't know about ordering. Um, Cottage orientation.
I could see somebody coming to a meeting and saying consensus from who?
Well, I don't think we call it consensus. I think everything we write on here is draft.
Yep. And I think we could say this is our consensus on what we're recommending
Yeah,
to the community.
yeah. Have to start somewhere.
Right.
And I think part of what we're going to want to do at that April meeting, because, you know, I mean, I just don't know where people will be, but is to say, we are happy to go through how we got to where we are, but to not allow, say, one or two people to consume all the time. I mean, that there can be another bite at the apple, but to the extent people are struggling or just want to know about their property, et cetera, I think we want to say maybe we set up some separate one-on-ones for that, because if you get a whole room full of people bouncing around about the implications of this, everyone will be confused, and that's not our goal.
No, and they're going to want those site-specific examples because they're
Yep.
immediately in their mind going to go to a property that interests them or that's their neighbor.
Yep.
So does it make any sense to write the rationale for these recommendations out so that we're not trying to explain ourselves and at least, I mean, we are explaining ourselves where they can read it and contemplate it rather than having to listen and then go, so what did you say? You said blah, blah, blah. Why did you do this? And that kind of a thing. Is that worthwhile, or is that just something we do live?
I could write for some of this, I can write, like especially this stuff, I could write the background,
Okay.
like the background summary, because then I can point to other sections in the code that support them.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I'm happy to do that. So Tom, I don't know if
Yeah.
think that'd be good.
But Sarah, I'm going to be devil's advocate here a little bit.
Sure.
Sarah, I think it'd be great if you have that in your notes, and I think you are the most credible spokesperson on that, because obviously you have the authority and responsibility, but you also have the greatest knowledge here. I think if we put a lot of stuff into these slides, it just gets harder and there's more to
Convoluted.
unpack. And I think this is kind of elegant and simple and
agree.
keeps people moving forward. I mean, yeah, we don't want to get people dancing on the head of a pin, and
Right.
and we don't. So to me, I would not over explain this. I'd try and keep it as numerically and bullet based as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then they too, the other thing, just in terms of keeping conflict at a minimum, is if they have a specific issue, which people love to do, is to kind of, well, but my property backs up on this and the road's here, blah, 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 is just say, we really put that in writing. Give us a concrete example in writing and what your concerns are.
I like that.
I like that a lot.
Because then we're not wasting everyone's time, A, and B, they have to be concrete as opposed to hypothesizing into oblivion or into absurdity.
Right. Well,
like
yeah,
that.
I do too.
So kind of in a following up to this whole discussion, it seems helpful to me, it doesn't need to be in our document, but to have some kind of maybe a sheet of bullet points for us to have, or just a background that says where we're different than the standards in current plan, or because if in reality, we've only tweaked a few things from what's available anyway, or that we have to do in the plan, if we get to the end and people are like, well, what can we make a decision about, or whatever. If we know where we've gone contrary to just the default and why we did those, then we'll be ready with explanations when they come up. And if they are just what we have to do anyway, or they're the standard thing, I mean, that's pretty easy way to acknowledge someone's concern, but also say the committee didn't really have any control. Our community plan doesn't really have a control over that.
Right. So basically like where we had room to work versus what was prescriptive.
Right.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's typically something, because what we really want to focus on is I want to make sure questions are answered, but it gets down to where the community had an opportunity to have some say. The committee did this great work. How do you feel about their recommendations?
Yeah, and I actually think that with a map accompanying this, people are going to get it really fast, because the first thing they're going to look for is their property. I mean, you know, this is of great interest to us, but not uniformly to other people. They may not be interested in what happens with middle housing. They may be interested in what happens to their property.
Yeah.
And so that's where it really helps for them to, and again, I'm really big on putting work for the people who are most affected onto them to be specific, because the hypotheticals aren't going to be helpful or constructive to the discussion, the live discussion. They just go off track.
Right.
And to ask someone to say, we've put a year into this. We've looked at all the aspects. We've looked at the maps. We've looked at other counties. Here's our best recommendation. Please tell us what your specific concerns are, and to really put a little bit of the work burden back on people who have concerns.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that and we'll also keep the meeting a bit more manageable.
Yeah.
But we should say that up front. The specific examples we would love to hear. If you can talk about it in a couple of minutes, and then if you have more details than a couple of minutes, then it needs to be in writing.
Right.
Well, and the famous question that we used to ask in land use hearing is, I'll use the 17-foot height restriction, is people would say, I don't like this, blah, blah, blah. And you say, what would you like? Here's what we can have. We can only have in this range. What would you like? Well, I don't know, but I don't want that.
Right.
What we don't want is no ownership of finding a solution.
Yep.
Right.
So
I agree.
are there other recommendations in this set for, what about landscaping?
Do we want to add the 150 square feet of open space per cottage?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Is that a maximum, minimum?
I think that's the most we can ask for.
Okay.
What would you say minimum?
So is that separate from the courtyard? Is that like their backyard?
So that is the common courtyard must contain, it says a minimum of 150 square feet per cottage within the cluster.
So that would count even for, like, in that diagram that we saw, when there were two cottages that weren't fronting the cluster, they would still have a bigger common space because they were calculated in.
Right. So yeah, and to Lynn's point, it doesn't have dimensions, but that common courtyard theoretically at 150 square feet per cottage, if there were 8 times 150.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. That's 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a, how it, I mean, if we convert that to the cost of the property, that's a lot. That's all I'm saying is in terms of the developer.
Well,
impact.
You could have a base minimum and then incremental on the cottages.
Also,
Yeah.
we've said that there's a 10-foot setback, right? So that
correct.
every unit has their own 10-foot backyard.
It's the perimeter, right? It's the perimeter.
Back or side yard, I guess, depending on how they're sited.
So if we required, I mean, technically we could drop the open space down to, I mean, we could propose 50 square feet per cottage, which would end up with, like, for 8 units would end up with 400.
Could
I
we
don't
do
know.
a minimum square footage? For
Yeah,
total space?
I think the 150, let's see. I personally like the idea of having some sort of open space standard per
Yep.
cottage. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think it isn't a cottage cluster, it's just a fourplex or whatever, or a townhouse, if you don't have that open space. I
Right.
think that makes room for somebody who wants a
Mhm.
place that has a good environment, but less of a footprint overall.
Yeah. And it may include, like, I guess what I need to confirm is, does that include parking areas as well? So how about my homework will be to look at open space thresholds for you guys. How about that?
Okay.
All right.
That would be great, and particularly in the context of investment decisions by developers, right? I mean, it makes all kinds of sense to me, but again, what we're trying to do is not create weekend housing for people who used to go to motels or hotels. You know, I mean, we're trying to create middle housing. And
Right.
so I'm conscious of the kind of, I just don't even know what that much real estate costs and how much that, um, if you have a courtyard, can that be your green space, or open space? It's the logistics of the goal that I don't have enough information to make a recommendation on.
Yeah. I will find out.
Although I wonder if providing a place for people to have weekend houses actually will free up some of the other houses that they don't, people don't need that much.
Yeah.
But right now
That's
they do. I have
true.
some very large houses that remain empty, probably about 355 days a year.
Yep.
So, I don't know.
Okay.
So this is kind of a starting point for a presentation on what we would think would be reasonable.
Yeah.
Some of these bullets become sets of slides or drawings. For instance, that could be a couple of different
Configuration.
configurations, and that is certainly going to be a couple.
Mhm.
So I'll have to think about how to present this visually.
Yeah. I guess we have examples of a 2-story or 1.5-story.
Mhm.
Well, this is helpful in getting the variables articulated and specific from us to the community to ponder.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is looking great.
Okay. So we have other things. That's the orientation we sort of danced around.
Mhm.
Common courtyard.
Oh, that's a good
the
slide, Tom.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
recommendation is 150 per cottage. That I took from the model.
Oh.
Yeah, that is the model. Now, in the Neskowin RR zone, that definitely, like, with the larger sizes, that is achievable. That would be 1,200 square feet, right?
Mhm.
Of course, if it's largely vertical, it's not going to matter much, but well, I mean,
Right.
trees. Yeah, trees.
So if it was a 4-unit, it would be 600 square feet of a courtyard for 4 units that would be required.
Right. And there's nothing, remind me again, Sarah, how the pieces of the puzzle fit together with regard to what's manufactured and what's, new construction.
Yeah, it can be prefab,
Yep.
and it can come in on wheels and then be permanently sided.
Right.
They have to be fastened. And if it's prefab, then they have to be stickered. They have to be inspected and certified in the state of Oregon.
Right.
Sometimes people see really cool things that they want to bring in from out of the state, that maybe don't have that certification and inspections. But what happens then is they have to tear out all the walls so we can see all the work. And then they have to tell us how they anchor them. So it really becomes less cost effective. So when
Right.
people come in and they want to talk to us about a tiny home or a small cottage or whatever, because they went to some expo and got inspired, and found this cute little unit for the bargain price of $12,000, we have to explain to them, you're going to have to tear the walls out and give us the engineering so we can make sure it meets our wind load requirements in Oregon on the beach. So in this case, it can be something small. It can be prefab. It can come in on wheels, but we would require it to, be permanently sided. So they have to use tie downs and probably some sort of skirting or foundation to put it on.
Right.
But as long as it's licensed and inspected in the state of Oregon, or it meets our building codes and they can prove that, there's all kinds of cool things that could be. We're seeing more container homes.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff out there. Just if you know anybody going to an expo, please have them talk to me first before they buy anything.
Well, I just think we'll need to, for our March and April audience, make that clear to people.
Yeah.
That's part of what's permitted here.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
Right. We're not talking about recreational vehicles.
Right.
Right. In the sense of, and I think as far as an aesthetics and a concern, these aren't RV parks. Like there's standards through building codes that will require them to be cited and look like they're cited.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Sarah, have you seen any financial models done as part of the state's efforts in this regard that says to get to the governor's goal, land has to cost no more than X, interest rates are at 6 to 7%, prefab has to be allowed, and the average unit costs X? I mean, has anyone done the business plan stuff on this?
Not that for the governor, not that I'm aware of. I'm happy to ask. What I do know is currently being kicked around from the governor's office is basically to remove a local review process for cities and counties to where the state, there would be pre-approved plans and pre-approved zoning permits
Of the actual structures?
and the development that would go through the state only and not come to the local level. They would also set the fees for that work. And I actually met with the governor's office last week to share with them my concerns about doing that.
Yeah.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Sounds like a recipe for people in communities to get more mad than they already are. It would basically like I mean, even just think about the 3 Neskowin zones, they would be stripped of whatever nuances were there, your driveway widths, and it would be pre-approved plans and essentially a pre-approved zoning permit that would all go through the state. We wouldn't see it either unless a geologic hazard report or something else was required.
Yeah.
Well, think of how different they would look in La Pine than here. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
Silly.
So, well, and it doesn't take into account fire codes. It doesn't take into account lot coverage maximums. I mean, every community and city has the ability now to have some decisions over this stuff. And so hopefully, like, I think it's a well-intentioned concept. It goes back, I think, to Lynn's, point about the governor not even coming close to meeting the housing goals and objectives for productivity. And I think these are some of the ways that they're looking at getting that done. And my hope is that by demonstrating, look, we're a partner, we're trying to do this in a way that best fits our communities, that it will encourage them to take a step back and focus on other options.
Yeah.
The pre-approved plans, like in terms of like tiny homes or things like cottages, if the state wants to do a bunch of pre-approved plans, where basically, we're still looking at zoning permits, but the structural plan review has already been done and approved. I'm good with that. But I think for zoning, I think we still need to do that at the local level.
Well, it seems, at one tool for getting to reasonable costs is getting to scale.
Yeah.
And Oregon has very expensive models because everything is done on kind of a boutique level, right? So we're not big on getting to scale.
Right.
And I'm not talking just about housing. It's our culture is, we want discrete and et cetera. But I think to your point, Sarah, is okay. How do we get to scale with just everyone without everyone just filing an injunction immediately on what do you mean that a pre-approved everything is going in next door to my house? I mean, it could cause a real unfortunate. I mean, we have to work these 3 things through as citizens, but you're right, Sarah, if they could take components of it and say, we're going to pre-approve, these 6 models and, we're gonna, I mean, I don't know how to pick some things that could be brought to scale would affect cost a lot, I guess is my concise statement. So just a thought. It'll be interesting. I'm glad they called you in to ask your thinking because
thank you.
A pre-approved zoning permit, I think that seems to me like in my ignorant old age self, like at least 6 years of litigation.
Oh my gosh, I know. Well, and then the reality is that we wouldn't know what's even been approved. Are they going to get us copies because the neighbors aren't going to call the state when they have questions?
Right.
They're going to come to us.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Ooh, Sarah,
which this work we're doing where we have some ability to make some decisions on our own is really good because we are demonstrating that we are willing to do the work and do it in a way that best fits our communities. So thank you all for doing that with me.
Okay, where do we go from here? There's several other community buildings. I mean, these are all in the model plan.
Right. So,
People just need to look at these and see if we want to, pick them apart or accept them
They-
as is, or
So
are they a lock? Are they,
They may include, but they don't have to.
yeah, may, that's a may.
I mean, I don't understand how on earth, now that I have the context of the other decisions for R1, R3, and RR, are they saying on that piece of land, those things would go in?
We can allow them. We don't have
Allow.
to, but we can.
I don't think there's any way in Neskowin on the hillside or on the flats that the community, I mean, I think this raises a whole lot of other issues because we have some community meeting rooms already.
Mhm.
We don't have exercise rooms other than, of course, that amazing thing called the beach.
Mhm.
And to cite someone a daycare next to someone's house, I can't believe that that would be allowable.
well, it depends on how it's organized. So if somebody had 3 parts of their family that when they come to the beach, they didn't want to be on top of each other. And so they built 3 bungalows, but they have an area where they can gather that's bigger than, because each of them is small enough where it really won't accommodate all of them. So it's probably more of a thing where it's an intentional group rather than just a random group of people who buy these things. And these things are kind of cultivating more of a village within a village. It seems like that's more likely that that's going to happen intentionally rather than randomly. So there may be a need for a community building or a shared building that would have a common kitchen or a barbecue or something like that. But I don't think it's completely in outer space that this, would be possible. But it has to do with who's 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 organizing and building this
Yeah,
group of buildings.
I believe you're correct, Rand. I think this language is unfortunate when they talk about community meeting rooms. I believe what they really mean is the community of that cottage cluster.
That is correct.
So
Oh,
this is unfortunate language.
So if you look down to the next section, so look at B as in boy. So the community meeting building, so a community building that would essentially be for that cottage community could at most be 900 square feet.
Right.
Right. So if we wanted to, let's say like, maybe even if there was a cottage community that someone did for folks who want to age in place, and you wanted to have a small, separate little building up to 900 square feet for them to play bingo in or congregate or,
Right.
play cards or whatever, or host a family party because, their cottage is 600 square feet. And I think that's the intent. I think we could pick and choose off of that list in A through E what we wanted. And maybe if you wanted, you could offer like a community meeting room or an exercise room. Something that's clearly accessory and ancillary for the benefit of that cottage community.
on a 20,000 square foot lot?
Well, it depends. They might have to drop a few cottages to put it in.
Right.
And it's up to, right?
Right. I mean, I guess the thing you have then is you have this requirement where you're going to have like, to stay consistent with the other values. This is a community that has a fire hall where we convene. It's a small community, 400 year-round residents. We have a fire hall, we have a golf course, and we have parking lots that we use or land that we use for food, the farmer's market. But to create community within community opportunities on these lots, in the community we have may disrupt other values. So
Good point.
I mean, so for example, if they take the common space, or they take the fifth building and make it an exercise room or a meeting room, that's in the middle of presumably a residential neighborhood, right? And I'm not saying that that isn't an interesting idea, but if you're the residents immediately next to it, and you have a small lot, and you have the traffic or the noise or the frequency, or fill in the blank, what about what you envision as your desirability of the community? I mean, I think if you had an area where you had 6 new cottage clusters built, and there was nothing near enough for them to use that was available to them for these opportunities, then it would make sense to me. But in a small community of 400 people that has 3 meeting spaces already, maybe 4, it seems like it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't get it.
Well, if you have like a set of condos or something, they usually have a meeting room. So like the Breakers and all those places, they used to have pools and meeting rooms and things like
They
that.
do, but do they now? I don't think
Well,
so.
Yeah, so some of the condos, yeah, they have a little meeting room because I've spoken at them before. I think Proposal Rock does.
yeah. And
The hotel, the hotel,
Well,
the
no, they do
Condo.
not have hotel status anymore. They are condos.
their condos.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's a 5th meeting room in a community of 400 people.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I can just say our meeting rooms are pretty minimal. I mean, maybe.
They are. I'm not arguing, but I'm just saying, if you say to people in Neskowin that you're going to have a community meeting room next to you, I don't think they're going to be excited.
Well, I think these community meeting rooms are for the 4 to 6 cottages. They're not
Right.
for, we're all gonna
Understood.
hootenanny over there. Well, you might have a hootenanny over there.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question, and I'll be interested to see how the community responds. But
Mhm.
I just would like to, I think it's,
Lynn, what about
yes.
this? What about a community building that could maybe have some washers and dryers in it? Maybe some exercise equipment, like something that is clearly for the
Yeah.
people who are residing in this cottage community.
I think that makes sense. I think the thing I'm asking people to think about, though, is let's say you had a 1 dwelling lot next to your house, wherever you are, any of the neighborhoods in Neskowin. And next door you have proposed 5 900 square foot units, each of which can house 4 people, which is 20 people. And then you have a utility room for them. And I would argue that most people in Neskowin today would say that is going to change the nature of my experience and the values of Neskowin. That's a big, I mean, I just can't even imagine that working for people. But we'll find out. I mean, I think if we leave it in there, I think we should be very clear what a community meeting room can be, like a utility room, like a guest house, like exercise rooms, like day. I think we should be this clear about it. But I will be surprised if people say that fits their sense of what Neskowin is about.
And each cottage cluster is permitted to have 1 community building, which shall count towards the maximum average floor area.
Right.
So then the question becomes, what's in that community building?
And do we have any ability to restrict what's in that community building?
Yep, let me double check on that.
I think and I'll just go to what NIMBY people always say. So could that be where you meet with your parole officer? Could that be where you do drug rehab? Could that be where, I mean, you just have to be really honest with people about what those things actually allow, and then we're fine because people will speak up.
Right. Okay. Got it.
I say this as someone who operated a group home for a number of years in a normal residential neighborhood. And
Yeah.
frankly, we moved our people out of there because the neighborhood was so hostile, it was not fair to our people.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's sad.
Well, no, but it's it's the reality of how people respond to these things. If you've got a beach cabin in Neskowin and you suddenly have 8 washers and dryers next door, I think you're going to care about it. But we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that we're close enough to 2 hours where we ought to wind this thing down. And I would like to schedule the next meeting. How does that sound to folks at this point?
Mhm.
You open to
Sounds
that?
good to me.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So if we take a gander at where we are today on the 24th. No, that was something else. We're still in February, Rand. Don't get ahead of yourself.
I have us down for the 10th of March.
Okay. That sounds good. 2 weeks from today at 2 p.m. Community.
And I will get minutes out this week, and my tech person says he's looking, but he's not optimistic. And the only thing I can say to make you feel better is I lost much equally important things in this collapse. So I apologize.
That doesn't make us feel better. It would feel
No.
worse for you.
It's your worst nightmare. I just want to say it was certainly so anyway, but I will get minutes out this week.
Thank you.
Just as a side issue to jump back just very briefly to what we were just talking about. I think that this particular slide which was taken from the model plan, was written particularly poorly.
Uh-huh.
I will take a stab at making it a little bit more clear what the intent is. Because we had to impute a lot of intent in that slide that isn't obvious looking at it.
Uh-huh.
Tom,
Thank you.
I'll also send you some emails with my availability. So I'll do
Okay.
my homework and then we can maybe meet up towards the end of the week. Does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Is it possible you could send me those, like the next 3 slides? So I have anticipation and can fit some of that stuff into the agenda.
Okay. I will update these slides and put them on the website. I'll send out a
link.
a link to them.
Dynamite. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. There was some work down here today, and it was good to see you all. It's been a while since I saw you. And yes, Mark.
Are you going to meet on the 24th of March also, Rand? Or is that your meeting after the 10th? It would be the 24th as well?
It
Just
probably,
looking ahead.
I
yeah,
think we
Okay,
should, because we'll have a lot
Okay.
about to happen then.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's the
Just
week
wondered.
before the housing meeting. So we
Okay.
could, we'll put that in there as well.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 2 meetings out and we'll get minutes for this to Candace, and from the slide deck, we'll get a better idea what to put on the agenda for that. The 10th meeting on the 10th. And with that, I thank you all for your input today, and progress continues. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, stop recording.